Hey guys, Matt and Andy back here again, Atlas Precision Consulting, to continue our discussion about the data migration journey. Last time we talked more about the whole process of what you're going to be expecting to go through, some of the important decisions to make, and then some of the things to do to hopefully get people to adopt your new system with training and whatnot. So this one shouldn't be a much longer video. We're going to talk more. This is all P21 at this point. This is talking about the specific data that you need to expect, what you're going to be responsible for, what the teams at Atlas or whoever's implementing for you are going to be responsible for, and then also talking about transactional data. So,
Was that a
Andy,
subliminal plug? That sounded like a subliminal plug.
it is in my
You're getting
title.
good at it, man. I mean,
It
like
is.
I actually now have to pay attention for them.
It's you know it's in the job description, I think.
I think it probably is. Yes. I'm
So
glad
so
you
what
feel that way.
So why don't we start with core data, since that takes a lot of effort from
Yeah, yeah.
the
So core data is like it's things that are kind of the foundation for other data. So think about things like users, product groups, discount groups, price families, classes. And if you're not on P21, I mean, hopefully users means something to you, but all the rest of that stuff might not, because a lot of those things like price families, those are P21 specific fields, but they probably have some functional equivalent in your system, or maybe they don't. P21 has a lot of different ways to categorize data. And so your core data is really about that. Things like freight codes, carriers, um,
classes.
locations, yeah, classes. So it's stuff that like almost never changes, right? But it's important to get it right up front because again, it is that foundational layer of all of your other data is going to be built on that. So if you think about it in a hierarchy, you have all this core data, which is the support structure for your master or your static data. And then layered on top of that is going to be your transactional data. So problems become exponential. If you miss it in core, it's going to kill you by the time you get to transactional and historical data. So it's really important to try to get these things right. And this is also, in my opinion, and we see a lot of companies not quite understand or get this right, and we end up having to make a bunch of pivots at the very end because then they finally see everything and are taking it seriously. And they're like, oh my God, what are we going to do? It's your core data is your opportunity to start to understand what makes P21 tick. So I'm going to give you the best example uh, carriers and freight codes. Like we see a lot of times where people have a code that represents, oh, this is UPS and third party bill, right? One code represents those two data points. Well, it doesn't work that way in P21. Number one, UPS what? Ground, second day, red, next day air, early AM saver. I mean, there's like a million permutations. And depending on what you're doing, you have to implement carriers along those lines. So if you are very heavy on parcel and you want to do automation on the far end with parcel, then you're going to need your carriers to represent not only the carrier but also the level of service, because you're going to have a singular ID that lets some other downstream process know, oh, you want to ship this UPS red, and carriers are the best way to do that. And it doesn't matter whether it's collect or third party or whatever, because you don't communicate that in a carrier code. Typically, you use a freight code to communicate that data point. And so getting the core data set up is obviously supremely important, but I think it's also supremely important that you are like ask a lot of questions and start thinking about it in terms of your business process. Like we had somebody go in and set up a bunch of carriers that said, "Oh yeah, this is UPS ground collect." There's no such thing from a carrier standpoint. It's just UPS ground, and the freight code is what makes it collect. So again, I think for us, and I know it was a long pause, edit it out if you see fit. I think for us, a lot of times we're getting in later in the game, right? Not always, but many times we're coming into the situation kind of late, and they've already been down that part of the journey, and that's probably why, as we start explaining things, they pivot because they have to. But again, really taking the time to try to think through the process and say, okay, we want this data to be reflected this way. Making a decision about, are you going to house product stratifications in product groups, discount groups, or both is important. Why? Well, whichever one needs to be reflected in the GL needs to be product groups, because product groups is the one that can be reflected in the GL, because product groups are tied to a GL code. Discount groups and price families are not. It also plays into, there are places in the system where, like, PORG is a great example. You can run PORG by product group. You cannot run it by discount group. You can run it by, which, I mean, for me, I'd rather see everybody running it by supplier anyway, but that's a different conversation. So, again, it all of it works together, and it's just important to understand that what you do here sets the tone for everything else that you're going to do. So you want, whoever you want to set it up can set it up. That doesn't matter. What matters is, because it's mostly key punch. There's a couple of them you can import, but it's mostly key punch. It's just important that they have direction and that they're setting it up with a purpose. We probably should spend a little time talking about, like, users, and then I don't want to get out of core data without talking about the chart of accounts either, because we see all kinds of landmines there as well. Users has like a million options, right? I mean, Matt, please jump in here.
Yeah, I mean, users are where most of your out of the box permissions are handled. Not talking about Dynachain permissions, but like who can, create POs, who can create POs from sales orders, who can, all these different options. Then there's a million checkboxes. And then there's also a whole nother tab of application security. Some are clear, some are not.
Yeah.
If you look hard enough, you'll find some videos of us talking about some of those not being super clear, especially around mass update. They tied it into some other permissions. But yeah, it's tons, but you don't have to have everything turned on, but you need to
Yeah.
understand what you're turning on and what you're not, especially stuff like costs, where do you want to expose cost to this user when he's entering a sales order? If you
Are you
do,
going to allow them to add an item to a location?
right.
Because
Like,
that affects how order entry works.
yeah, that's a huge one. Items on the fly, and adding an item to location are huge permissions that are controlled at the user level.
Yeah. So we see a lot of people, they're like, oh, well, here's the basic user setup. We're going to give that to all 100 users and we'll figure it out later. And then later never comes. And so, again, take a little bit of extra time on the front end and get it right. Chart of accounts is another one. That is huge, because, you can define, when you set up your company, which is also core data, you define, like, this is how my chart of accounts segments for my GL accounts are structured, and whether or not I'm going to use branches and which segment the branch is and all of these other things. But, like, you have to map all of that stuff whenever you're bringing anything over, when you're doing your GL import at the end, when you're doing how you set your customers up, how you set up item defaults and customer defaults, and then, all these kinds of things. Like, you're going to have to map all of that. And so you want that to be as clean and as simple and make as much sense as possible, because we very often see people are like, oh, we'll just throw the basic accounts in there, and then they go try to import data, and the accounts they really need don't even exist. So, and we see people, like, they set up a million accounts, then they tag them with a transaction, only to realize, oh, we didn't really need that account, and then they find out, well, you've had activity on it, you can't delete
Yeah,
it now.
there's no going back at that point.
Yeah,
Once you,
and so it can get really messy really quick. So, again, I just can't stress it enough. Build a good, solid foundation.
I want to add one thing that's going to connect. It's going to tie into the static data, but it is a core data, which is unit of measure.
Yes.
Understand how you're going to use unit of measures, because when you go to do the item part of it, it's hugely important because it's such a pain to make those changes afterwards, especially if you're talking about, is an each a one, is a case a 10, those trying to change those affect cost, pricing. Know your unit of measures before you go. Don't just assume, don't put in everything in as an each and we'll fix it later. That ain't
Here's
gonna
the
work.
best advice I can give for that. If anybody in the room says, "Oh, we'll just do," and then finishes the sentence, stop right there and reevaluate, because there's no just doing anything on that subject.
Spend the time, especially with your static or your core data. Spend the time at the beginning. Do it right, because you're going to pay for it later if you don't. Spend the extra time up front, not
Yeah.
after.
That
So
is a
let's.
really hard change to unravel. Even
So
for us, it's hard to
oh
unravel.
go yes, it's and it's never 100% right. Like you'll be chasing it forever. Same thing with lots. Like if you're bringing stuff in as lot tracked, make sure it starts off as lot tracked. It's a pain to do it the other way.
And you had to use that word. So
Yeah.
then that'll get me off on the lot attributes
Well,
rant
it's not even.
about whether or not that should
We,
be turned on. So
yeah, we don't have to go.
call us.
Yeah.
Now I'm plugging.
Yeah. All right. So let's
Anyway,
go from core data to the static data.
I think we picked up this terminology from
I don't know where it came
Epicor.
from.
I think we did. I think we picked it up early on from Epicor, and it never like there. First off, I don't think there's any such thing as static data anymore. But but this is master data. So this is like non-transactional stuff. These are you might also call them entities. So you're talking contacts, customers, vendors, suppliers, which are two different things in P21. Um,
Items,
uh,
assemblies,
items, assemblies. Yep, those are good ones. Predefined
ship twos.
routes, secondary process steps, um, ship to locations. This is where you're going to start. Like again, you got to think through how you want to do things. So, and I'll give you a great example. So, worked with a customer, still working with them, where they have these mega customers that have tons and tons and tons of branches. And so what they did was they set up one account for the corporate customer.
Yeah, that's a thing too.
And then I hadn't even got to that part yet. And then they set up every branch was its own ship to. And it destroyed their reporting and it destroyed their ability to be able to manage credit the way they wanted to manage it, because everything was rolled up under the same customer ID, when what they should have done was had a corporate account with no ship tos. My opinion, corporate accounts don't have ship tos, but sometimes you have to for like credits and stuff like that. But anyway, um, but they should have had a corporate ID, and then every branch was a customer, and that would have flowed way better with the rest of their data, and it would have worked way better.
Yeah,
Especially, I mean, like if you're dealing with this right now, if you're EDI heavy, these are conversations you've got to think out, because certain settings for EDI are at the customer level. Actually, technically, there are no ship to level EDI settings.
I was about to say, I didn't think so.
Everything's at the customer. Well, I know I keep modifying systems and I have to remind myself, no, man, that's all UDFs. So anyway, the master data is huge, and it's going to be a little bit different for everybody. I've never seen anybody that they all handle it the same way or whatever. Everybody's got different things, and you get into all these nuanced settings where you look at this template and it goes out to like column BC. So you got 55 columns or whatever of data that you're trying to fill out, and you just get completely worn out by it. But there's some key stuff in there, like packing bases for your customers, like acceptable wait time, which sounds pretty benign, but that actually drives what happens to the requested date when you enter an order. If you set an acceptable wait time to 3, when you enter an order for that customer, it's going to jump the requested date out 3 days. People don't realize that. So, these are, and which drives when pick tickets print, right? If you're using PickScan. So, and you should be. But Yeah, it's just like it's all these little things. Max shipments for order. That drives how many invoices somebody's going to get on a single order, which also drives when pick tickets are going to print and drives when they're going to get their back orders. These things are important. We had a customer that said, we're just going to set everything order complete. We always have everything in stock. Yeah, that turned out to be not so true. And they had this mess on their hands because they would have 50 line orders, 49 things in stock, no pick tickets were coming out because everything was order complete. And so, anyway, these things really, really affect not only how your system works, but what your customers feel from you via the system. And so, I always believe you put the most possible effort as close to the customer's dock as possible and then work backwards. So in my opinion, if you're going to put less effort into something, do that on the AP and vendor side, except for our account. That one you should get right on day
Yes,
one
100%.
if we're your implementation partner. But
Which we should.
all, work from the customer's dock backwards.
Yep.
Because you can hide problems that you're having internally the farther away they are from the customer's dock. So put all of your emphasis and effort in getting your ship dues right, getting your customers correct. Obviously it's all important to get right, but get those really, really right.
Yeah.
That's just my opinion.
Yeah, and we always say it like this is a complicated process. This is a long process, but the most important thing is your customers should not feel you going through this process. To your customers, it should be business as usual because you don't want to make that phone call of, "Hey, sorry, we're doing this new system thing and we screwed this up," and blah blah blah.
Or
So
worse, send out a letter to everybody. That's
yeah,
always fun.
that always gives everybody the warm and fuzzies. Hey,
Yeah.
sorry, we're going to be screwing up for a while.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
No one wants to write that one.
But kind of expanding on what you're saying about that 55, once you get into talking about P20, you'll start seeing these import documents, whether you're going through us, which we typically handle those as far as filling them out, importing them. But there are decisions that have to be made, and it's take your time, make your decisions. If you don't understand what a column is, not everything's required. Actually, there's a bunch of bare minimum stuff that's required, but there's a lot of not required stuff that's super important, whether it's items or customers or suppliers, vendors, all these different things that you can change later, but they don't like on supplier rebates or at the vendor level. I don't know. It might be at the vendor level. If you want a vendor to accept rebates, it's just a checkbox. But if you start doing stuff and then go, oh crap, we didn't have it turned on, it doesn't go backwards and look at the transactions before that. You're going to have to go figure that napkin math out. So there are decisions that you can change later, but it's better to try to get it as right as possible from the beginning.
Yeah, and the other thing about it too is most of these settings don't exist in your current system.
Yeah, that's
Like
the other
they're
thing.
unique to P21 and there's no equivalent for them. Especially because if we do 10 data conversions, 8 of them are going to be coming from a much simpler system than P21. Because that's natural, right? Like you're going to go from this level to
QuickBooks.
this level and right.
Yeah.
And so like these things don't even exist. There is no mapping them. So they are business decisions where you have to put conditional logic that says, well, if it's these 10 key accounts, we want to handle it this way, but everybody else, this credit is a big one. Oh my gosh, credit and days overdue for credit hold. You get those wrong, your accounting team's just gonna
Yeah.
have all kinds of issues.
And it's not as cut and dry as you would like it to be when you're
No,
saying
it's not.
credit and terms and all that. It
So
works, but you got
anyway,
to do it right.
yeah. So there's a playbook that you go by. You do them in pretty much a particular order because some, like you can't do items before you do vendors and suppliers. And you can't do suppliers before you do vendors. Now, those can go together and often do, but they not always. Just depends on how your business is structured and how you interact with your
And you can
suppliers.
have a vendor that doesn't have a supplier because it's AT&T or
Yeah,
something like that.
right. Expense vendors, and we've seen like everybody says, well, just set everything up as an inventory. Well, why? I mean, you're creating suppliers where you don't need them. They're just a vendor, but whatever. Well, then that just takes us into really transactional and historical data. So typically your Your transactional data is going to be things like sales orders, purchase orders,
AR, open AR.
yeah, open AR, open AP, and an additional trial balance. That's typically it. And then on the historical side, you're going to push in item history, which is sort of a roll up of your sales to build out your purchasing forecasts, your item usage, and then you can import a bunch of closed invoices. That's your sales history, and then production orders, stuff like that would be transactional. So as an example, production orders and secondary process and stuff like that, you're probably going to be entering by hand.
Transfers, if you're
Transfers you would
doing
probably enter by hand. There is an add-on to import transfers.
okay.
So if you do a lot of that, yeah, there is, and I don't think it's super expensive. So if if you need to import a lot of transfers, get with your Epicor Cam on that one. It's
Make sure
worth
you
having.
understand how transfers work in P21 because it's. I'll say
Find
this
an implementation partner that has felt that pain.
Yeah, transfer back orders. That's all I'll say.
Yeah, those are rough or can be.
But yeah, I mean, now saying we typically import a lot of those types of transactions, but like if you're somebody that has 50 open orders or 100 open orders
just
spread
enter
across,
them and
just enter them. It's good training, and it saves you money on paying us or anybody else to sit there and try to import. There's no reason because it's going to cost you the same if we're importing 100 or 5,000. Now, if you're getting up into the 10,000, then that takes longer to run. But so if you're in that manageable state and you have a good 2 or 3 Uber users that have been practicing and training, go see our previous video and just enter those in.
Yeah, a few points on the transactional data, and it's really the 3 key transactions, which are OpenAR, OpenAP, and inventory. Those 3, you need to be driving toward a tie out. Like you need to be able to run an AR trial balance in your old system, do this import, run an AR trial balance in P21, and they should match. Same thing with OpenAP and same thing with inventory. And that gets tricky when you get into lots and things like that. But those 3 need to tie out. Obviously, we would want to see transaction and line counts on anything, POs, sales orders, historical data, whatever. But those 3 are the reason they're important is, and a lot of people don't realize this, when you do an inventory import, an initial inventory import in P21, you have to remember at the end, you're going to do this big GL entry, right? Your inventory is already going to be in it at the GL. So what you're actually really doing is uploading the subledger, the underlying detail. You're getting your quantities on hand and all of that. And so when you make that import, you're going to have it hit this certain account. We call it a load account. And that's going to basically mean that when you do your GL import, your inventory value is going to be double. And so you have to kind of create this reversing entry to get that doubling out. And so you just reverse it off against your load account. And now you have your subledger and you have your inventory and everything's good. And so that's why they need to tie out so that you don't have a gap. And I don't like people, well, it'll never tie out. Yeah, it should. If it's tied out in your system,
math
it should.
Is math.
It is, with the exception, I'll give you some grace on decimal precision. If you're into parts that've got like 8 levels of decimal precision, and we see that all the time. But I'll even tell you on that. Like I just did one a month ago. It was $300 million worth of inventory, and we tied it out within like less than $10. And it was all decimal precision. So it can be done. AR should tie out to the penny. There's no reason it shouldn't. When you import your open invoices, you will not load those in such a way that they hit the GL because they're already going to be in the GL when you do your GL import. It's going to be the same thing with your vouchers, your open AP. When you import those, they do not hit the GL because it's assumed that you're going to do a GL import that's going to bring in your balance. If you're greenfielding from scratch and you're not going to do, like, you have no trial balance to add, P21 is your first ERP system, then at that point you need to change your strategy. It's not going to be a normal load. You're going to let your invoices hit the GL. You're not going to do a voucher import. You're just going to have to go in and enter the vouchers because you need them to hit the GL, and that import does not hit the GL. So it's going to be just stuff like that depending situationally, you're going to do things a little bit differently.
Yeah, and I would say that's probably very rare.
Oh, like 0.1%. It's
Yeah.
like we've only seen a couple that have ever gone that way, where it's like we're just starting from a clean slate. Okay.
So, I mean, and we knew this wasn't going to be a super long video, but we felt like it deserved to kind of be broken off into its own conversation. But this video and the last video, if anybody takes just one thing away from both of these, is it's the foundation. It's doing the work up front because if you do it well up front, you'll have a much easier time with everything after the fact. If you try to go quick and make not educated decisions, you're going to feel it later. It's just the way it is, because everything is tied to everything, and if you screw up, a lot of times there's no taking it back out or even making another change.
Well, here's a great example. You can't say we're only going to bring in customers we've sold in the last 2 years, but we want to bring in 10 years worth of invoice history. That doesn't work. If you're going to bring in 10 years worth of invoice history, you got to bring in all those customers. Now you can go back and flag them deleted later, or set their credit status to inactive and they can't enter orders, or make them prospects later, or whatever you want to do. But they got to be there because the invoice import's not going to work without them. So anyway, yeah, no, good conversation. I think you're right. It doesn't have to be a lengthy discussion, but getting into sort of the technicals of, hey, here's a lot of stuff you got to think about. Again, we're just trying to spark that creative thought.
Yep.
Certainly reach out to us if we can help you. We're happy to do that. This is what we do.
Yep.
But
On
other
this
than that,
topic or any other one. I mean,
yeah.
And yeah, so a nice quick one for us, which is a change from our 3 or 4 hours live stream.
Yeah,
we used to do,
30 minutes. This is great.
which used to just zap me full. Like it was not good, not good.
Well, look at how much you're going to get done for the rest of the day,
Yeah,
right?
right.
All
All right, guys. Well, appreciate you guys watching. I'll do the cheesy. Make sure you like, subscribe, and follow, or whatever you're supposed to do.
Push all the buttons except
push all
the
the
one with the
buttons.
thumbs down.
But the biggest thing is reach out to us. Go to our website. Go to our YouTube channel. Make comments.